That night with my son Lucas was by far the craziest, yet most meaningful night I've ever experienced. My name is Michael, and I want to share a story I've carried inside me for a long time. A story about my son, and how we found our way back to each other after losing someone we both loved deeply. Lucas is 19 now, but this began a few years ago, shortly after my wife Barbara passed away. Losing her was the hardest thing I've ever faced. Suddenly, it was just Lucas and me, left to navigate life without her. At first, Lucas withdrew into himself. He spent most of his time shut away in his room or out with friends. He never wanted to talk about his mom, and I didn't want to force him. Instead, I tried to show him in small ways that I was still here for him. I cooked his favorite meals, left little notes on his desk, and made sure he knew he wasn't alone. But for months, the distance remained. Then, one evening, something shifted. Lucas walked into the kitchen while I was cleaning up after dinner. His voice was soft, but steady, as he asked, "Need any help, Dad?" I was surprised, but also relieved. I handed him a towel, and he quietly began drying the dishes beside me. We didn't talk much, but it was the first time in what felt like forever that he chose to be with me. Over the next few weeks, I noticed more changes. He started spending time in the living room while I watched TV, helping with little chores, even sharing stories about school and his plans for the future. For the first time since Barbara's passing, I felt a spark of hope. We were slowly finding our way back to being a family again. Then came the night that changed everything. Lucas started spending more time with me, lingering in the kitchen while I cooked or sitting nearby while I folded laundry. At first, I thought it was sweet, like he was finally trying to reconnect after all those months of silence. But what stood out most were his words. The compliments weren't about me personally. They were about the little things I did. "You make this house feel alive," he told me one afternoon. His voice carried so much emotion it stopped me in my tracks. I didn't know what to say, so I just smiled and said, "Thank you, son." Moments like that began to happen more often. If I was cooking, he'd offer to help. If I was in the garden, he'd come sit nearby. If I picked up a book, he'd ask about the story. It was as if he was searching for ways to be close. Not because he didn't know what to do with himself, but because he didn't want me to feel alone. One evening, while we cooked dinner together, Lucas paused and said softly, "You've done so much for me, Dad. After Mom died, you took care of everything. I never really said thank you." His words caught me off guard, hitting me harder than I expected. My throat tightened as I answered, "Of course, Lucas. You're my son. I love you. There's nothing I wouldn't do for you." He gave a small nod, and for a moment we just stood there, side by side, in quiet understanding. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. It was the first time in years that I felt like maybe, just maybe, we were finally healing together. That night, as I sat on the couch with a book, Lucas surprised me by asking if he could read along. I couldn't remember the last time we'd shared something so simple together. Not since he was little. Part of me wanted to keep the moment to myself, but another part knew this was too important to turn away from. "Sure," I said, shifting over to make space. As I read aloud, he leaned in, listening quietly. At first, it felt like stepping back in time, like before everything became so heavy. But the longer we sat there, the more I realized he wasn't just listening to the words on the page. He was watching me, almost searching for something. When I finished the chapter, I set the book aside. "That's enough for tonight," I said with a small smile. "Thanks for reading to me," he replied, his voice softer than usual. "You're welcome. Good night, Lucas." "Good night, Dad." The next morning, I came into the kitchen and froze. Lucas had already made coffee and set out breakfast. He looked up with a bright smile. "Morning, Dad. I made you some coffee." It was something he hadn't done in years. "Thank you," I said cautiously, taking a seat at the table. "You work so hard," he said suddenly. "You deserve someone to take care of you too." I swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. "That's very kind of you, son. But you don't have to do all this." "I want to," he said simply, his tone leaving no room for doubt. Later that day, I escaped into the garden, hoping for some clarity. I sat on the bench surrounded by flowers, trying to make sense of the shift I felt between us. After a while, I heard footsteps. Lucas appeared with his hands in his pockets. "Can I sit with you?" he asked. "Of course," I said, even though part of me longed for quiet. We sat in silence for a few moments, the only sounds the rustle of leaves and distant birdsong. Then he spoke. "You've been quiet lately." "I've just had a lot on my mind," I admitted. "Is it about me?" he asked, his voice gentle but serious. The question startled me. "Why would you think that?" He shrugged. "I don't know. I just feel like maybe I upset you somehow." "You haven't upset me," I said quickly. "I'm just tired." He nodded slowly and stood up. "I'll leave you alone then." His voice was quiet as he walked back inside. I sat there, guilt pressing heavily on my chest. He hadn't done anything wrong. He was just trying to reach me. So why did it all feel so heavy? The days that followed felt strange, like a quiet storm hanging over the house. I went through the motions, cooking, tidying up, keeping busy, but the tension was always there. Not anger, not conflict, just an invisible weight between us. One night, I made a choice. After dinner, I retreated to my room earlier than usual. I curled up with my book, letting the soft glow of the lamp wrap me in a small cocoon of warmth. For the first time in weeks, it felt like I had a moment to breathe. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end of it. Something between us was shifting, and sooner or later, I'd have to face it. That night, I was lying in bed with a book when I heard a soft knock at the door. "Dad." Lucas's voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "Yes," I answered, sitting up slightly. "Can I come in?" I glanced at the clock. It was late, much later than he usually stayed awake. "Is something wrong?" I asked. I wanted to talk," he said. I set my book aside and told him to come in. The door creaked open, and there he was. Not the confident young man I usually saw, but more like the little boy who used to crawl into my room after a nightmare. He stood there for a moment before sitting down on the edge of the bed. His eyes stayed fixed on the floor until finally he whispered, "I'm sorry." "For what?" I asked carefully. "For being different lately. For making things feel uncomfortable," he said, his voice unsteady. "I don't know why, but I've been acting strange, and I don't want you to think I don't care about you." I blinked, surprised by his honesty. "Lucas," I started, but he cut me off. "I've just been feeling a lot of things since Mom died, and I don't really know how to deal with them. I don't want to make you feel worse." His words hit me hard. I reached out and put a hand on his shoulder. "Lucas, it's okay to be confused. It's okay to struggle. But you need to remember this. You're my son, and I'll always be here for you. No matter what." His eyes shimmered with tears as he nodded. "I know. I didn't know how to say it." I gave his shoulder a squeeze. "You don't need to apologize for missing your mom, or for not having everything figured out. We'll figure it out together, one step at a time." He managed a small smile, stood up, and said softly, "Good night, Dad." "Good night, son," I replied, watching him leave the room. I lay awake for hours afterward, my mind racing. But this time, instead of unease, there was something different inside me, something like relief. Because for the first time in years, we were finally talking about what was really going on. That night, I had just begun to drift off when I heard a faint knock at my bedroom door. "Dad." Lucas's voice was quiet, almost hesitant. I sat up, my chest tightening. "Yes. Can I come in?" I hesitated, glancing at the clock. It was well past midnight. "Lucas, it's late. What's wrong?" There was a pause. Then he answered, "I just need to talk." I sighed, setting my phone aside. "Okay. Come in." The door creaked open and Lucas stepped inside. He looked uncertain, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. For a moment, he just stood there, then finally sat down on the edge of the bed. "I've been thinking a lot about what I said the other night," he began, his voice low. "And I feel like I need to be honest with you." "Honest about what?" I asked carefully. He swallowed hard, staring at the floor before looking up at me. "I'm scared," he admitted, his voice trembling. Since Mom died, I don't know who I am anymore, and sometimes I feel like I'm too much of a burden on you. I don't want to lose you too. His words hit me like a blow. For a moment I couldn't speak. Then I placed a hand on his shoulder. Lucas, I said gently, you are not a burden. You're my son. You've lost so much and so have I, but we are in this together. I will never leave you. I promise. His eyes filled with tears, his shoulders slumping. I just didn't know how to say it before. I thought if I told you, you'd think less of me. I shook my head firmly. Never. Feeling broken doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. And the fact that you came in here tonight to tell me this, that shows strength. He wiped his eyes, managing a small nod. Thanks, Dad. I just needed to hear that. Anytime, son, I said softly. We'll figure this out. Together. He stood up slowly, whispering, Good night, Dad. Good night, Lucas, I replied, watching him close the door. When he was gone, I sank back onto the bed, my hands trembling. Not from fear, but from the weight of everything we had finally spoken aloud. For the first time in a long time, I felt the faintest spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, we were finally starting to heal. That night, I was drifting into sleep when the sound of my door creaking open jolted me awake. Dad! Lucas's voice was barely a whisper. I reached for the lamp, the soft glow filling the room. Lucas stood in the doorway, fidgeting with his hands, looking more like the little boy I used to comfort after nightmares than the young man he'd become. Lucas, I said, my voice thick with sleep. What are you doing? It's late. He stepped inside slowly. I couldn't sleep, he admitted. I just needed to see you. My chest tightened as I sat up, trying to steady my breathing. It's late, son. You should be resting. I know, he said, his voice trembling. But I couldn't stop thinking about everything. About Mom. About us. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and looked at him carefully. Lucas, we've talked about this. It's okay to feel overwhelmed, but you don't have to carry it all by yourself. He nodded, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. I don't want to lose you too, Dad. You're all I have left. His words hit me hard, cutting straight through the fog of exhaustion. I stood and placed my hands firmly on his shoulders. Lucas, I said gently but firmly, you're not going to lose me. I'm here. Always. I know you're hurting. I know you're confused, but we'll get through this together. He blinked rapidly, a tear slipping down his cheek. I'm sorry if I've made things harder, he whispered. I shook my head. Don't apologize for grief. Grief makes us do and feel things we don't understand. But none of that changes the truth. You're my son, and I love you more than anything. For the first time in weeks, his shoulders relaxed. He nodded slowly and whispered, Thank you, Dad. Go get some rest, I said softly, giving him a reassuring squeeze. Tomorrow is a new day. He gave me one last small smile before turning to leave, closing the door gently behind him. As I sat back on the bed, my heart still heavy, I realized something important. The nights ahead might still be long, and the road through grief uneven, but as long as we faced it together, there was hope. Couldn't sleep that night. I kept replaying Lucas's words in my head, trying to make sense of them. I told myself it was just a phase, a moment of confusion that would pass. But deep down, I wasn't sure. The next morning, Lucas was quiet. He barely said a word at breakfast. When he left for school, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. I spent the day pretending to focus on work, but my mind kept drifting back to our conversation. Something inside me whispered that this wasn't over. When he came home that evening, he was distant. No eye contact, no conversation. He went straight to his room. I wanted to talk to him, to make sure he was okay, but I didn't know how. I felt trapped, afraid that saying the wrong thing would make everything worse. Later that night, I sat in the living room, the TV on but nothing sinking in. The house was heavy with silence. Then I heard footsteps. Lucas stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Can I sit with you? He asked. I hesitated, then nodded. He sat down, leaving a small gap between us. For a long time we said nothing. The tension was suffocating. Finally, he whispered, "Dad, I don't want to lose you." "You won't," I said quickly. "But we need boundaries, Lucas. For both of us." He nodded, eyes fixed on the floor. "I understand." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "We'll get through this. But you have to trust me." His eyes flicked up, filled with pain and something I couldn't quite name. "I do," he said softly. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. The days after that talk were tense but quiet. Lucas kept his distance and I tried to act normal. But the silence between us felt like a wound that wouldn't heal. One night, exhausted, I went to bed early. The cool air drifted in through the window, and the hum of the fan was the only sound. I must have drifted off, because suddenly I woke to the sound of my door creaking open. "Dad!" Lucas's voice was a whisper. I reached for the lamp, flooding the room with light. He stood in the doorway, his hands trembling at his sides. "What are you doing, Lucas?" I asked, my voice thick with sleep. He stepped inside, his eyes glossy. "I couldn't sleep. I just needed to see you." I sat up, heart heavy. "It's late. You need to rest." "I know," he said, his voice cracking. "But I can't stop thinking about everything." I swung my legs over the side of the bed. "Lucas, I've been thinking about it too. But listen to me, what you're feeling, it's not wrong to be confused. It's grief, it's fear, and it's heavy. But it doesn't mean we give in to it." Tears welled in his eyes. "You're the only one who's ever really been there for me. You've always cared in ways no one else has." My throat tightened. "I care because I'm your dad. That's my job. But the way you're hurting, it isn't healthy. And it's not your fault. We need help." His shoulders slumped.
I'm sorry.
"I just didn't know how else to tell you." Pulled him into a hug. He stiffened at first, then clung to me like he was drowning. "It's okay to feel lost, Lucas," I whispered. "But I promise we'll figure this out. Together." For a long time we sat there in silence, the fan humming, the night pressing in around us. For the first time, I didn't feel like we were running from the pain. We were facing it. The following weeks were different. Lucas started spending more time with his friends. His focus shifted back to school, and slowly he seemed lighter. We never brought up that night again, but the unspoken understanding remained. One evening, we sat on the porch, watching the sun sink below the horizon. The air was warm, the sky streaked in orange and purple. "Thanks for being patient with me, Dad," Lucas said quietly. "Thanks for accepting me, for who I am, for helping me when I didn't even know how to ask." I looked at him, surprised but touched. I laid a hand on his arm. "That's what dads do." For the first time in what felt like forever, his smile looked genuine. And in that moment, I knew we were going to be okay.